So, contrary to what a lot of people believe, you can actually get everything you need from a vegetarian diet. We'll talk about that. So I basically broke up all of my macro and micronutrients, well, all the macronutrients, and I went into a couple of the micronutrient stuff. So we're going to talk about each of them. First of all, fat. In the vegetarian diet, there's some advantages to following the vegetarian diet, especially for weight control. There's cardiovascular fitness advantages that come along sort of hand in hand with following this type of diet. They may not necessarily be what an athlete is looking for, but they get these benefits regardless. You have a higher intake of dietary fiber and polyunsaturated fats. Something that, again, you need to be aware of as an athlete is that you are automatically getting a lower fat diet, so that may not be ideal for your fitness goals. So you need to take that into consideration. So like I put on here, like less than 10 to 15% fat in your diet can be detrimental to heavy training and intramuscular triglyceride stores. So that's something to consider. So basically, vegetarians need to take into consideration all the different things that any athlete needs to take into consideration. We all have different goals, so you would tailor your diet to what your goal is. And you just have to be aware of the little tweaks that you have to make if you want to follow a vegetarian diet. Some sources of poly and monounsaturated fats are avocados, olive oil, corn oil, and nuts. That's that. Carbohydrates. Vegetarians tend to consume a high carbohydrate diet. It just kind of, again, comes hand in hand with eating this type of diet. So that can be another benefit for certain types of athletes, as we've discussed. And they can be found in foods like cereals, grains, fruits, and legumes. Protein. Protein is a really big thing because a lot of people think that it's impossible to get in a vegetarian diet, and that's really not the case. You just have to be conscious of complementary amino acid sources. So basically, when you're eating something that is a meat product, you're getting a complete protein, and most of the vegetarian foods, you aren't getting a complete protein in one food source. So you have to be aware of eating a variety of foods. But for example, if you're getting like lysine from one type of food and a different amino acid from another type of food, that you would get both of those in a meat product, you just need to eat a variety of foods that have different amino acids in it. So you will get a complete protein by building it, basically, rather than just eating one type of food. Let's see. And the ACSM recommends that vegetarian athletes increase their protein intake by 10%. Because plant proteins are not as easily digested as animal proteins. What you really need to do is just have a variety of foods. Vegan and vegetarian foods tend to be less calorically dense. So because of that, you basically just need to eat more food, which we all need to. And so some calorically dense vegetarian foods are like sweet potatoes, nuts, figs, whole wheat grain products. Calcium, so we're kind of in the micronutrient world at this point. Calcium is another thing that people think you may not be able to get enough of if you're eating a vegetarian or vegan diet, and it's important. There is actually some evidence that vegans and vegetarians require less dietary calcium because in general they consume lower total protein, and because of that, and lower sodium. Therefore, you have what's called a decreased renal calcium excretion, so you store more calcium, which is interesting. Calcium can come from non-dairy sources like kale, broccoli, bok choy, textured vegetable protein, tahini, almonds, and other calcium-fortified products. So especially for vegans, they may have to eat more fortified products rather than getting it from regular food. B vitamins. B vitamins are another micronutrient that vegetarians and vegans B12 especially is important in the formation of DNA, red blood cell development, etc. And I put that in there because for a long time people were supplementing with B12, thinking that was going to give them better VO2 max and greater performance, but studies have shown that that's not necessarily the case. But despite that, it is important for other things. And it can be found in whole grain cereals, soybean, dark green leafy vegetables, seed vegetables, nuts, and avocados. But that's mainly for vegans, because vegetarians who eat dairy products and eggs will get plenty of B12, so you don't have to worry about that. For vegans, it can only be found in fortified foods like nutritional yeast, cereals, and soybeans, which there are a million products out there, so it's really not that challenging anymore. Iron. Iron is important for endurance, as it plays a role in the oxygen transport to the working muscles. And we learned a lot about iron from JG's presentation last class. And interestingly enough, vegetarians, they find actually consume more iron than non-vegetarians. But it all comes back to the non-heme iron, which meat products contain heme iron, and vegetarian or vegetable products contain non-heme iron. And basically the non-heme iron is less bioavailable. And as JJ mentioned, that consuming citrus fruits and stuff with vitamin C on it can help offset that. So that would be an important thing to think about as a vegan or vegetarian athlete, that you're eating some vitamin C so you can get your iron. Some examples of iron-filled foods are bread, cereal, legumes, nuts, seeds, dark green leafy vegetables, and some dry fruits. Creatine is found primarily in meat products, and therefore vegans and vegetarians aren't getting it from their diet. So the only way to get it is to supplement. But that being said, vegans and vegetarians have the most to gain from supplementation because they don't get it from their diet at all. So if you're a vegan or vegetarian athlete, you may want to consider supplementing with creatine.
The creatine supplement is not derived from animal.
There are, and I didn't do a ton of research on this, I just kind of stumbled across this in my different papers that I read, but there are apparently vegan, and that's the one actually put up there, claims that it's a vegan
strictly no animal amino
That's
acids.
what it claims.
Okay.
But just like you said, they're not regulated by the FDA, so some of the health benefits of having a vegan or vegetarian diet is lower rates of cardiovascular disease, lower morbidity, mortality, that just basically means less disease, and lower blood pressure, cholesterol levels, less risk for certain types because of the high amount of antioxidants in the diet, which again comes hand in hand with having a vegetarian diet. There may be a performance benefit because it will decrease the amount of oxidative stress that comes along with exercise or heavy exercise. And the benefits of vitamin C, E, and carotene, which are readily found in the vegetarian diet. And I just think really the quinoa, and then there was something else, I can't remember, it was like a seaweed or something. And I think it's just that those aren't really foods that are vegan to be aware of, because you really need to read the food label just like anything else. Because they can put all kinds of stuff in there. It can be high in fat, it can be high in added salt, it can be high in anything. And if you're not reading the food label, you'll never know. Just because it's vegetarian doesn't mean it's necessarily good for you.
Form of soy to eat because of the fermentation process of the tempeh, and so it's a lot easier and better for your body to absorb the different nutrients, and the different protein through, as opposed to eating like the silken type of tofu that's just.
I have heard that.
Not so good because of the processing.
I've heard that as well.
It's fermented, it creates more bacteria for the bacteria in the intestine.
I guess a
And
probiotic.
that helps, and that helps the nutrients get into the body more efficiently.
The lights don't low, he's out.
Any other, I was gonna say, wake up, Robin. Put those lights on you. Any other questions? Does anybody-